The information provided in this episode is not intended to be medical advice. Please contact your medical professional immediately if you have concerns and questions in regards to the health and wellness of your ostomy or overall health. Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Me Plus Talk brought to you by Comitech. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm Matt, an ostomy product specialist.
And this is Rene. I'm one of the Me Plus certified wound ostomy continence nurses here at Comitech. On today's episode, we're going to dive into diet and nutrition with Wendie Taylor. Wendy, we are so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, Wendy, thank you so much for joining us. So just to tell you a little bit about Wendy. So for one, she's an ostomy product specialist as well. She's also a territory manager for Comitech. But more importantly, she's also a registered dietitian. So we're really excited to have her here today, share some of her insights, and learn a little bit more about diet nutrition and how it relates to your ostomy.
One of my favorite things.
Right. So Wendy, if you could just dive a little bit into a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I've been in healthcare sales for many years, and I've been a dietitian for more than that, 16 years. So I've spent time working in this type of business, helping people that needed products, and I've spent time on the other side, helping people in a private practice setting, and I even did some specializing in helping them with their gut health. So that's why this is really interesting to me now to come back to Comitech and be in a role like this.
Absolutely. That's amazing. I love it.
Well, we are very excited about all the topics that we're going to kind of cover today with the diet and the nutrition and the things. But I think a couple of points to get us started that I believe you will agree with is that it's so important that everyone understands that anything that we discuss today is not a set rule. There is no such thing as a set dietary rule for the people living with an ostomy. And it's going to take time for them to figure out and for you to figure out what's going to work best for you. Also, we cannot express enough how important it is that any discussions that you have need to be with your healthcare professional. Your friends will have ideas, your family members will have ideas, but your healthcare professional is going to be the one that can know more about your surgeries and help you out with what's going to work best for you from this point on. Do you agree with all of that, Wendy?
I do. I think life and health are just built on eating good, nutritious food. But I understand with people, especially with an ostomy that might have been dealing with diseases like Crohn's for most of their life, or situations where like their GI system wasn't handling food properly, that there might be some fears around food as well and their body's ability to digest it.
Of course. So kind of diving into that a little bit, let's talk a little bit about, post-surgery. You just had ostomy surgery, obviously, and now you have a new diet. Obviously, it may be temporary or, recommending different types of foods or foods to avoid. So could you just go into a little bit about what it looks like to have surgery and why that diet is so important post-surgery?
Yeah, the diet is important post-surgery because obviously your gut has just gone through a lot, but your body actually has their body has been through a lot if you think about it. And I think it puts a lot of fear in people when they see this big list, they come out of surgery and they're like, I can't have these foods. What am I supposed to do? Right. And they think that they have to give up like so much or the enjoyment of eating. But I think for most people that have been suffering for a long time, on the contrary, they might find out that they have this surgery and they start to eat and they actually feel better. I've Yeah. So from just talking to people since I've been in this role and working with WOCNs, that is what I've come to find out. But it is common also, like I said, to develop some fears around or confusion around foods. And depending on what surgery they have, they might be dealing with some nutritional deficits and have to adjust to some different eating patterns and habits.
Exactly. Go ahead, Rene.
Well, actually, I was just going to say, when they're, like Matt said, just right out of surgery, there's some tips that we have as ostomy nurses, but what kind of tips can you give them for introducing new foods into their diets after that?
Well, really, the important thing is to focus on making small changes into their daily life. And so we'll just roll with the word small. Small meals is
Okay.
important right afterwards. So things are always better digested when you try to eat in smaller doses throughout the day. Timing is probably important too, but it's also going to be different for everybody, because just like not everybody's stoma is the same.
Exactly.
People, the way that they digest food, our DNA is just not the same. So what works for one person might be completely different for another. It's going to be a process, but I would recommend starting small with small meals, and really chewing your food is another one. And balance. And balance means a diet that doesn't demonize specific macronutrients. So all foods have a place on the plate. That's carbs, proteins, and fats. And it has enough micronutrients. So that's like your vitamins and your minerals.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
And I like
Go
the
ahead.
point that you made, there's a healthy balance, and demonizing food. I know we talked about that a little bit the other day. And it kind of hit home with me only because, you don't really think about it, but I think all of us demonize food. When you think of, eating red meat, you're like, oh, that's not good for you. But in the right portions, it's actually really good for you, and it's very important. So I think that's a good point that you made, that although that we have this perception of certain types of foods, it's also very important to have that included in each one of your meals, and it helps the recovery process. I think that you had mentioned, protein, how important that is, and making sure that it helps, rebuild the structure of your body.
And then when you've got changes like this, you want to make sustainable changes to your lifestyle and health that will be sustainable. So I find that just a good balance of all three, that's carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Carbs get a bad rap, but our body wants and needs carbs for energy. And, a lot of times people think carbs are the specific food, or they demonize the carbs, but they're actually your body's favorite preferred source for fuel. And there's basically types of carbs that are like fiber. So your insoluble fiber and your soluble fiber, those types of fiber help you digest food. They keep you from being constipated. Some examples of foods that are high in fiber would be your grains, your beans, fruits and vegetables. Milk sometimes gets forgotten. People don't realize that milk or yogurt are a carbohydrate. So yeah, they'll be really helpful, but we can go back into protein too, like you were talking about. Protein's especially good for recovery. So carbs for energy, and protein, you want to save the protein to help your body recover after surgery. So protein helps you build and maintain and repair your cells. So things that are high in protein would be your beans and nuts, seeds, your fish. So they don't always have to be red meat. I know I live in the South, so everyone thinks like meat. I'm from the Midwest. Everyone thinks meat and potatoes. Yeah. But you can get it from nuts, seeds, eggs. Eggs is a big one. And then dairy falls in that too, milk and cheese. And then there's fats, which can get demonized too. Fats can, but fats are our longer lasting source of energy. So when you eat fats, and you'll know by trial and error what's enough fat for you, what's not with an ostomy, but they sit in our stomach the longest. So they actually keep us fuller longer, but that would be like your nuts, your seeds, your olives. Olive oil is a very heart healthy fat. Avocado, and again, fish like salmon, or other fatty fish like that.
Yeah.
You have a term that you use, is intuitive eating.
Yes.
And I thought that was extremely interesting and a fantastic phrase to use with an ostomate, or a person living with an ostomy, due to the fact that you kind of have to learn your body and how it's going to react to certain foods. I'm not sure if that's what the phrase intended it to be, but that's what it said to me. It spoke to me in that way, that let's use your intuition on, okay, I've tried this before surgery, and I had this reaction. My stomach kind of got a little loose. Things weren't quite as pleasant. And maybe as an ostomy person, that might not be something that I should eat this time. Is that does that work into that mentality that you were
It
going
is.
through?
And it's interesting that you say that, because that is one of my favorite books that I recommend to people all the time, because it's based on 10 principles. And honestly, it's just self-care. It goes beyond the food, just like it is listening to your body. And there's chapters at the end that you kind of have to go through the process first. But one of the chapters is gentle nutrition. And so that reminds me about what you're talking about. A lot of people get into it because they've been on the diet roller coaster their whole life or whatever. And, but they find that, it's not just about eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full. But we learn that food is so much more than that. So food is satisfaction, and food is culture and connection with other people. So it helps you to tune into that. And what I love about it is it takes the guilt out of things, and it teaches you to give yourself compassion. And so after, you get to the later chapters, it talks about gentle nutrition. And that's where, it really is understanding, like, this food doesn't suit me. It is not working with my body. Like, my body doesn't like it. I don't feel good at all. And that is when, like, so a lot of people that get in, they read the book, they think, oh, this is just all about eating pizza and donuts, but it's not. It is about understanding your body and tuning into your body and knowing what your body wants and needs, and how it's going to medically perform properly. It's like optimal. Yeah.
And a person living with an ostomy every day, that is, their concepts and their way that they go about looking at food is so different than what it was before they had surgery. Like you said, they could have either been very sick, or it could have been an emergency situation. But either way, it does change the way that they have to think about things. One of the things we talked about the other day as well was the issue with gas and the foods that build up the gas, and how important that is to persons with an ostomy. Can you kind of go into that just a little bit?
Yeah. And gas can be really embarrassing too. So I know, like, smaller meals, again, are going to help with that. Chewing, making sure you're chewing up your food properly. So that starts the digestion process. This is specific things that will help. Not eating before you have an important event, like right before, or like right before you have a job interview, or you're going to meet your friends. So that those type of social things, that's going to help. Food wise, yes, like fattier foods, your fried foods with carbonation, carbonated drinks, things like that are going to, obviously, if you're drinking a lot of soda, and soda is carbonated, and what is that? It's just shooting it full of air. That is what's going on in your gut. So avoiding foods that might cause gas for you are important too, but also the different surgery types. Depending on whether you had a colostomy or ileostomy, you might experience some differences with that too.
Of course. It kind of, sparked a question that I had, talking about those two quick subjects was, I know you have a passion for the mental side of it, and, how a patient recovers in that, mental aspect of it. So I just wanted to ask you, I know there's a lot of anxiety and stress surrounding your diet after surgery. So if you could, tell someone living with an ostomy how to manage that, or how to approach that situation to best overcome, thinking about planning a new diet, or just really managing that anxiety that they may be having.
Yeah, I think that it's a big misconception that they have to give up everything. And that is normal too, by the way. I think people might come through this and I want them to know that too, that it's completely normal to feel that way, that everyone feels that way. But foods, you don't have to give up your favorite foods. You can still have your favorite foods. It doesn't mean you have to give up the enjoyment of eating. And actually they might feel actually that they can have foods that they might not have been able to have in such a long time. But I think those fears are common and they're normal. I also think that, yeah, the mindfulness side of things, some things to remember are, what is the situation like when you're eating? Are you taking time to sit down? My husband eats standing up all the time. And I'm like, sit down. You know, your body, it not only it has to deal with this food, but it has to like find a way to process it. And if we just slow down, deep breathing is one of the things that really helps with digestion. If you can take a few deep breaths before you start eating, and calm, it gets your body into like the rest and digest state versus like we're always in our car, we're always running around, running through the drive-through, running to this meeting or that meeting, snack machine. So those type of things, like that anxiety, that rush from place to place, is going to affect your digestion too.
Now, how much does fluids play into the digestive state that your body comes into? Is it really necessary for us to drink something every time we're eating?
Well, I'll give you a couple tips there for that. Fluids are really important. Actually, fluids when you're eating can actually dissolve some of the digestive juices that help your body break down food. So if you're drinking a bunch while you're eating, it might not, your body might not digest the food as well. But fluids for ostomates in general are going to be super important so that they can move, so that they don't become constipated, so that their stool doesn't, so that it moves through. So drinking plenty of fluids throughout the day is going to be really important. Drinking them like while you're eating at your meal is actually going to kind of dissolve some of those digestive juices that'll help you break down the foods.
You know, I like that you said that. We get a lot of questions we get this question generally a lot from our customers, is just, you know, how to avoid blockages. You know, that's one of the biggest concerns that patients have after having, you know, surgery. So, you know, that's kind of a key point that you made there. Make sure that you're drinking lots of fluids, definitely during each meal. It helps kind of break down that digestive process.
Lots of fluids, and fiber. And there are a couple different types of fiber. So there's the types of fiber that's soluble, and there's the type of fiber that's insoluble. And I can kind of walk through those. So soluble fiber, it dissolves in water, and it helps. It's the fiber that we hear about all the time on commercials on TV. Like, it helps to lower the cholesterol. It stabilizes your blood sugar, you know, all that stuff. But it also draws in water to the gut, and it helps to soften the stool. So that's the type of fiber that's going to help when you have a blockage. But you also want insoluble fiber. Insoluble fiber does not dissolve in water, but it'll add bulk to the stool, which helps the body eliminate it more easily. So your soluble fiber would be like your oatmeal. And that would be like, you know, you can drink it. It's not that great. But Metamucil, it doesn't taste that great. It is a soluble fiber. Then you get your insoluble fibers, which are in a lot of fruits and vegetables.
Right.
Think like the insoluble fiber would be the peeling of the apple, and the soluble fiber would be the inside of the apple.
Got you. Makes sense.
Some of the things that we like to make sure that people understand when they're leaving the hospital is exactly what you're talking about with the different types of foods. But we also have to remind them, like you mentioned earlier, Wendy, with different surgeries, there's different requirements for the body. Yeah. With a colostomy, most people are told as they're leaving the hospital, you know, you can pretty much, once you get through the surgical pain and discomfort there, you're pretty much going to be able to eat whatever you want to eat. Right. With an ileostomy, it's different. Ileostomates do have to worry about the lining on the corn and the beans, and all of this fiber that you're talking about is not going to necessarily be their friend for a while. And you're
Right.
going to be given a list after surgery of what your physician prefers that you try to begin with, probably be a
Mhm.
very soft diet. And you're going to progress through that. And as you do that, you're going to add these foods in. And like Wendy was talking about, you're going to start out very small. You're going to, if you haven't tried it yet after surgery and you want to try some beans, then eat a very small amount, wait, be done with it for that meal,
Right.
and see how your body reacts. And then after that, if everything went fine, you can eat a little bit more of that next time you have it. But any new food should be introduced that way. And like Wendy also emphasized, please chew your food very well, especially with an ileostomy, because as Matt was bringing up, blockages are going to be something that you need to be concerned about.
Right.
Drinking the water, as long as your diet and your physical health allows water, a lot of water in your diet, make sure that's a key component, as well as balancing out the food like all of us have been talking about through this session so far. So just wanted to kind of throw that in from the nursing perspective.
Good point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it also makes me think about the risk for dehydration too. They are at a higher risk for dehydration, and or diarrhea or vomiting because of it
Exactly.
being an ileostomy. So fluid and electrolyte balance are going to be really important with them too. And also vitamin and nutrient deficiencies. So if there is a deficiency, I know that they would want to talk to their healthcare provider and make sure that they had some supplements.
Yes, and those supplements, please, everyone understand that supplements, again, are absorbed differently in your body than what it was before. But
Right.
just basically because of the coating on the outside of certain medicines. So talk to your physician about the fact that you have an ostomy, and that so you might need to alter the route. In other words, instead of a tablet, can I do it in a liquid form?
Right.
Generally, again, colostomies, you don't have to worry about it as much, but it's a good conversation to have with your physician. Ileostomies, that should be the first conversation you have when he or she starts talking about medicine.
Of course. I love it. And, you know, kind of thinking about all that we've talked about so far, it really stems a lot down to just, you know, portion control and trial and error, you know, figuring out what's going to work best for you. But what's also exciting that, you know, I hear from a lot of my customers is the fact that I know Wendy made earlier. A lot of these foods that you weren't able to eat before, you're able to revisit and kind of, you know, maybe eat more frequently than you were able to before now that you have your ostomy. So that's exciting in and of itself. So, you know, we talked about anxiety and stress and how all these things can affect, you know, your recovery process, but there's so many positive things that come along with it as well. I think it's very important to make sure that you keep in mind as you're going through this and figuring out what's working best for you and what's going to work best for you going forward, for sure.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
just going
Go
back
ahead.
to making those small changes
Yeah.
every day. People often, they get overwhelmed with a lot when they leave the hospital.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
Another thing you talk about, Wendy, is the relationship that people have with food. And like for me, if I couldn't eat my potatoes, I'm sorry, you know, just take me out. I love my potatoes.
I'm with you, Rene.
So for someone like me who now has an ostomy, and I have this relationship, because that's, again, I love the way you put that, because that's exactly what it is. I mean, I know slow and all of that, but is there any other tips that you have that would help us through that process of, I can't eat that right now? So what's your tips for this?
yeah, I mean, if you leave the hospital and you have a list and potatoes is on the list and you love potatoes, then obviously I would try it out. I would try it in a small amount. And, you know, we do this with kids too. Like, it doesn't have to just be that potatoes don't work for you ever anymore. Maybe it's the way that they are cooked. You
Right.
know,
That's a thought. Yeah.
maybe you can have the potatoes. You just need potatoes in your life in a different way.
Yeah.
I like that.
Potatoes
But, I
can
mean,
still be
it's
in your
any
Experimenting with
life.
different
food.
ways.
Yeah, it's any food. I hadn't thought about it like that. You could just
Like,
alter
if you
the way
change
it's
the
cooked.
way you look at things, the things you look at change,
Yeah,
right?
of
Oh,
course.
wow.
One of my
That's
favorite
profound.
phrases.
I love
That's
it.
very profound. I do too. I love that.
I didn't come up with it. I heard it somewhere.
Well, I appreciate you sharing it, most certainly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Wendy, if I could ask, we talked about a lot today. If there was one thought or anything that maybe we haven't talked about yet that you wanted to share with our listeners or viewers now, what would that be? Or if you just kind of wanted to round up with a single thought of just your thoughts in general.
After everything that we've said, I hope you come away with some, tips. And I just hope that if I leave them with anything, that they don't feel afraid that food can have a place in their life, and that enjoyment, just because they have an ostomy, it doesn't mean that they don't get to enjoy foods that had a place in their life at one point.
I love
Might
it.
just be a little time.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
Slow and
I have a friend named Sarah Biggert. She's spoken with us before, and her statement is input always makes output. And
Right.
that goes not only for the foods that we eat, but the attitude that we carry around during the day as well. So we just hope that this session has given you guys some tips and tricks on how to get through your day and increase the diet and nutrition information that you've gotten. But as always, if you have any specific questions about anything, please give our Ostomy team a call. Our Me Plus team number is 1-800-422-8811. You can always request some free samples of products if you need it and want to try something different. Again, that's 1-800-422-8811. Wendy, do you have any closing statements that you'd like to make?
Thank you so much for having me on this show.
No, thank you for joining us. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
We did. We did.
Well, thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Looking forward to the next episode and all of you joining us there as well. Wendy, thank you again. And as always, this is Matt.
And this is Renee. Have a great day.
Me Plus Services and Care from Convatec brings you tools and advice to help make life with an ostomy completely your own. The products and support you need, the tips and advice you can learn to use, and a community you can grow with. Enroll in Me Plus today by calling 1-800-422-8811 or log on to mepluscare.com. That's mepluscare.com.